Bullying is on the rise in Malaysia.
Tahu ada segelintir penghuni cyber yang memang suka mencari kesalahan orang lain, biarpun
From school corridors to the comment section online, cancel culture has become a weapon in our digital age.
Cancel culture and social media actually go hand in hand.
On Herald Voices, we speak to Gerard Koe.
I'm working for a Catholic organization called Catholic Care Victoria. I work as an addiction specialist in mental health and also as a family therapist.
Gerard has been a counsellor for over 25 years.
I operate from a psycho-spiritual perspective because I believe that mental health problems are not just the result of us, having trauma and having psychological problems. I think it's also a spiritual problem.
In this episode, Gerard will unpack the psychology behind cancel culture.
Cancel culture takes this bad mouthing and destruction to a whole new level.
And we find out the dangers about this phenomenon.
Youth suicide is not an uncommon outcome of this sort of cancel culture.
This is the ugly truth about cancel culture. Hi, I'm Kacang Kevin and welcome to another episode of Herald Voices. Today we're diving into a topic that's been making waves online, cancel culture. But why are we talking about it? Well, here's the thing. Bullying in Malaysia is on the rise. Thousands of cases are being reported every year in schools and universities. It's a serious issue that's affecting more and more young people. Now, in a recent newspaper report, criminologist Dr. P. Sundaramurthy from University Science Malaysia explains that bullying has three key traits: a power imbalance, the intentional infliction of harm, and repetition over time. When you think about it, cancel culture isn't that different. It's basically bullying with a cooler name. Instead of encouraging education, it leads towards condemnation. Instead of compassion, it promotes ostracization, shutting people out, and it leaves no room for redemption or change. So why are we talking about this? Because of our children. And even we adults are living in this online world where cancel culture thrives, and it's affecting people mentally, emotionally, and physically.
We know that children and young people who are familiar with cancel culture methods and actually use social media in sometimes a very cruel way to cancel people they don't like in school, okay? And this can have terrible results, So just by putting out there on your Instagram or your Facebook page a rumor, a lie, or an embarrassing story, even if it's true, and having it read by all of one's peers, that can be extremely destructive. Youth suicide is not an uncommon outcome of this sort of cancel culture, okay, using social media by the young. Now, young people, as you know, especially adolescents, are psychologically and emotionally in a very vulnerable stage of their lives. They're looking for recognition, they're looking for acceptance, they're looking for validation towards their emerging identity. Yeah? And so if they experience social rejection like that, not just by one person, but by a whole group or by a whole school, okay, because somebody canceled them on Facebook, okay, now they can be driven to despair, depression, and even suicide, if they become victims of cancel culture in their school or peer communities.
Now, the big question is, what's driving this rise in cancel culture?
Cancel culture and social media actually go hand in hand. Cancel culture wouldn't have gained as much notoriety or momentum without social media. So you could say, sometime around 2010 onwards, cancel culture began to be the, dominant way of destroying people who don't agree with you. Facebook would be a classic example, okay? So the primary means of canceling an individual is through blocking, through unfollowing a person, or through verbally targeting them on social media platforms. So you don't really need to publish your complaint or your unhappiness or your annoyance about anyone or any group using the newspaper, radio, or television these days. That could be actually quite costly and slow. All you need is a computer, a mobile phone, internet connection, and a social media platform like Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Elon Musk, X, Instagram, and other social media platforms. And you can send whatever you feel about someone or some group to hundreds of people with a mere touch of a screen. Okay. And now that's the power of social media. You can get things out there to tens of people, depending on how many people you have as friends, or hundreds, or thousands, or even millions almost instantly, So, of course, having this kind of power can lead to all sorts of strong moral concerns that we people these days have. Simply because this power can be used not just for good, but it can also be used for evil, for lies, and for the destruction of other people.
Again, if you're wondering, how does this impact us? Well, our faith teaches us to stand up for moral truths. And in a time when competing ideologies challenge long-held values, this could impact the way we live as Christians.
This phenomenon about publicly rejecting, boycotting, or ending support for particular people or groups because of their socially or morally unacceptable views or actions is not really new. But I think the key word here is, socially or morally unacceptable views. And that, I think, unfortunately, Kevin, tends to be determined not just by objective moral values, but that tends to be determined by culture and ideology. Now, let me give you an example. Like for those on the far left, they support they support abortions, even if it's full-term abortions. So they support gay rights, transgender ideology, the rights of children to choose their gender. They support trans men competing in female sports or trans men using female toilets. They support getting rid of religious perspectives from the political decision making, and even support getting rid of religion from the public place. A radical feminism, another example of the progressive left, favors educating women not to be controlled by conservative female roles like being a mother, a housewife, or childbearer. They promote unrestricted migration, even if it's illegal. And they can be quite militant environmentalists like Greta Thunberg, okay? So if a liberal, progressive, left-wing Labour or Democrat government gets into power, then it is quite likely that they will try to promote a culture that is consistent with their ideology. And to that end, they will tend to promote culture warriors who will look out for organizations, businesses, celebrities, and individuals to pressure them to conform, or else they will be cancelled and victimized.
Sometimes people call someone out because they genuinely want accountability. They want others to take responsibility for their words or actions. But here's the problem, it often stops there. There's no room left for dialogue, for learning, or for forgiveness. Instead of helping someone grow, cancel culture tends to shut them down.
That's a saying that, the pathway to hell is filled with good intentions. Huh? I think that many people, they want to rid the world of evil. And that's a good thing, okay? But doing it based on subjective ideological ground has a lot of problems, I believe, okay? I think these problems are certainly what cancel culture is immersed in, okay? So people who are holding to certain ideological positions regarding the Green movement, LGBTQ movement, the transgender movement, the pro-choice movement, using cancel culture and other militant means to push their agendas can be extremely problematic, okay? I think one has just look at the history of communism to see how the ends justifies the means, and that this approach is full of problems. Huh? So the motivation, there are people who feel that they, like when I want to share things on Facebook or WhatsApp, okay, the purpose may be good, but if it is just an ideological slant, then it can be problematic. Or if it's fake news, then it can be problematic. So I think that those of us who do this, we need to take the effort or the trouble to ascertain that what we share, what we say is at least true. If you are posting something that can damage somebody's reputation and you didn't hear the other side of the story, that can border along malicious intent or, slander. And if it is going to destroy a person's reputation, even if it's true, you have to ask, is it charitable? If it's going to create a larger good, then perhaps this is, for public safety, for instance, or public awareness, then it may be good. But if this is going to unnecessarily destroy a person's reputation, then maybe you want to start by talking to that person first rather than putting it out there on Facebook for so many people to see.
Now let's talk about what we can do instead of canceling someone. First of all, we can begin by having an honest conversation with our young people, teaching them that everyone makes mistakes and that compassion and understanding go a lot further than hate and humiliation.
Teenagers, for instance, when they are publicly shamed or cancelled, they could face social rejection. They could face a loss of friendship. And they could even experience online harassment from other people reading, what has been posted. And this is often too much for them to handle at this unstable and vulnerable age of their lives, okay? As I said, social acceptance and being liked by your peers is one of the most centrally important things for a teenager. And so being cancelled online can be the most devastating thing they can experience when their sense of self, their worth, and their identity that has not yet been strongly formed is just shattered. Yes, you do have a right to set your boundaries and decide whom you want to give your strong opinions about on Facebook, okay, or social media. But in many cases, cancelling a person has the opposite effect of what was originally desired. And cancelling can very easily turn into bullying, into cyberbullying especially, through uninformed gossip that misses the full picture, provides just snap judgments, and especially when people's egos are involved, wanting to hammer that person or wanting to destroy that person. And so if that's what you want to do, is that a good thing from a moral and spiritual perspective? Do you do these things to humans, even though that guy is not really a fantastic person, but do you want to destroy him, Secondly, you want to educate the young especially that cancelling someone doesn't really help them to grow or learn from their mistakes. If anything at all, it makes them more defensive, and this shuts down the opportunity for insightful learning. Okay. The thing about cancel culture, especially among the young, is it doesn't just affect the person who is cancelled or the person who is cancelling, but it can also affect the mental health of bystanders. In fact, there's a guy called Toller who actually did research on this, and he found that cancel culture actually not just affects those who are cancelled and those who are cancelling, but a lot of people who are observing this, because it's on social media, isn't it? It can be observed by a few hundred people, huh? And those who are observing, well, what happens to them? Okay, so when you're observing this negative drama unfolding on your Facebook or your, Instagram involving cancel culture, those who are observing, they can be overwhelmed with the idea that, oh my gosh, if any mistake I make, people can use that to cancel me too. So this causes them to learn that there is an active fear of being cancelled if they make any mistake, and because of that, they are often, don't want to open their mouth. They don't want to share any ideas because they fear being cancelled. They fear that if they share something, this will be perceived wrongly and somebody is going to attack them or cancel them. And what this does is actually, it just stifles openness. It stops people from having and engaging in healthy discussion and debate, and discourages individuals from speaking out or admitting their mistakes, and ultimately this is not good for helping people to grow towards meaningful change and growth.
If there's one thing I hope you take away from this conversation, it's this: canceling isn't the only way. Let's learn to be more forgiving, more understanding, and instead of making mistakes public, let's help correct them in private and with love.
And help your young fella to understand that even though the motivation for canceling somebody is, you want to make things right, or you want to set people straight, okay? But in the end, it isn't the only way you can do that. Or it might not even be the best way or the right way to deal with somebody who has made a mistake or somebody whom you've had an interpersonal conflict with, isn't it? Okay? So protect your peace and set healthy boundaries when it comes to engaging in dialogue online, to make sure that you are not just overreacting too quickly. Make sure you know the facts about the situation and try to allow people to learn and grow from their mistakes. We're all human after all. So canceling culture does not mean absolving people from their responsibility. It just means allowing them space for them to reflect on their behavior instead of banishing them forever on the internet. Cancellation in high school doesn't really constitute a teaching moment. Rather, it is an unnecessarily harsh punishment and public shaming, often with devastating consequences. Now, if you want to help the guy, don't go and shame him publicly like this. Go and talk to him nicely, okay? Or send an SMS which is more private between the both of you to help him to be aware of this. Cancelled teens are often left out, snubbed, bullied, ignored, and isolated. And many therapists report treating teenagers who suffer from depression, anxiety, and suicidality for months after being cancelled by their peers. So you need to help them to realize that when you do this, this is the effect. And that effect is quite devastating. So even though you think that it's the right thing to do because this guy acted like a jerk, but is this really what you want to do, okay? So if they were a Christian, I'd say, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus do this? Okay, and we know, from psychology that teens who experience being cancelled, many of them struggle for years to trust themselves, to trust other people, and to ever feel belonged, okay? So the moral conviction I have in wanting to cancel somebody, that's a good thing. But teenage cancel culture gives them permission to bypass empathy and forgiveness in favor of being right. And as I said, sometimes it's better to be kind than to be right. Okay? And I would encourage them to learn to have debates and discussions about topics they disagree on. And we are not all bad, neither are we all good. As humans, we have our brokenness. And just because of a few mistakes, that does not necessarily reflect the entirety of who we are. We are not all bad, and human nature is much more complicated than that, okay? And to post something that just has the capacity of labeling a person for life like that in the eyes of all his peers, that is not just wrong, but it's cruel and immoral. Maybe you want to do it after thinking for 10 days, maybe that's fine, okay? Or after trying many other things, but should not be your first impulse to post these things out there. Okay?
So that's our episode for today. We felt that cancel culture is something that really needs to be talked about, especially with so much news about bullying in our nation recently. Now we know not many Gen Zs might be tuning into Herald Voices, but if you're a parent, we hope this conversation helps you reflect and maybe share a few thoughts with your children. Because at the end of the day, what the world needs more of isn't cancellation, it's compassion, understanding, and the courage to forgive. I'm Kacang Kevin. A big thanks to my guest today, Gerard Koe, Senior Family Counsellor, for his inputs and insights on cancel culture. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.